Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping notes. First of all, today's session is being recorded to be available for post-conference viewing. If you have any questions for the presenter, please use the chat feature in NIS mobile application. And in case we have time left, some of them might be answered. Or another option is that Mr. Scheninger will share his personal contact in case you want to get in touch with him. The speaker today will have a total of 45 minutes for the workshop, and we plan to finish at 4:30 p.m. Nur-Sultan time. So now we are moving along to our session. Please welcome Mr. Eric Scheninger.
There we go. And let me just set my timer because you're on a timeline. I'm on a timeline. Honored to be here with you today. My name is Eric. Right now, it is about 1:50 in the morning here in Southern California, where I am, where I was working with a school earlier, actually yesterday. So we're going to talk about digital leadership. And I have a resource for you. I will put it into the chat box when I am done. And as you heard, you can contact me at any time. So the presentation today is based on one of my books. And we're going to dive in a second. And as you heard, I was a principal. And prior to going into leadership and early on in my career, I kind of had a fixed mindset. I did not believe in what I now talk to schools about, or what we eventually did. I had that fixed mindset, and two things changed my whole trajectory as a school leader. Number one, a student told me school was like a jail. That was kind of the first inclination that I had to change as a leader. And that student told me school was like a jail because I was chasing him through the halls of my building because he broke our cell phone policy. The other thing that happened back in 2009 is I got on Twitter. Twitter changed my whole perspective as a school leader. When I got on social media, my eyes were open to what we should have been doing well before we actually did it. And that's kind of the journey I'm going to take you through during our time together. If you want to connect with me on social media, there's my Twitter handle right there. If you want to share out during this session on social media, please use that hashtag. That way I can see it, and I will respond to you if you ask me any questions. So let's forget about digital for a moment. And let's talk about effective leadership. Leadership isn't telling people what to do. It's taking them where they need to be. Leadership is not about title, position, or power. Leadership is about action. I tell you this because leadership hasn't really changed. What's changed is the environment in which you lead in your classroom, in your school, in your country. And as we think about those critical elements, anytime we want to achieve a goal, sustain an initiative, it relies on how well you empower your teachers, your students, your community. And that's why people's on the foundation there here on this image. But as we look at effective leadership, people want to know, well, why do we need to change? How will this help us become better? And what will tell us if we are actually successful? So that vision and purpose, that overreaching why is so critical to get the ball rolling. But then from the why, you got to go to the how. And that's the strategy that you implement, how you set your goals, determine outcomes, identify success measures. Then it's how well you communicate. The professional learning that you establish, that's ongoing, that's job embedded to help people grow. the environment that you create that gives people autonomy, empowers them to take risks. So as and you'll have all my slides to refer back to, but what you see here is nothing really new, everybody. It's just a different take at probably, the most important element, which is the people that you serve. And as we move from, sort of that vision, that planning, it's kind of good to have a visual that helps us always question where we are. And if you start here at 11 o'clock, the question is, how can we improve? And that's the thing, everybody. There is no perfection in education. We can always get better. So as you think about how we can improve, that's where you set your goals. From goals, where do you want to go? And that establishes your outcomes that you want to accomplish. How do we get there? That's the strategies you implement. And we're going to talk about some strategies as we go throughout our time here today. Strategies help you determine how will you measure success. What are those measures and targets that you want that are going to tell you whether or not you're progressing with your change? How did we do? And that's the results. So this cycle never ends, everybody. And as we go through, we're going to talk about some real critical elements that are part of what you do every single day as leaders. And that's kind of what I learned as a school principal was, hey, let's work smarter, not harder. Let's do what we already do better. Let's focus on the elements of school culture that are pivotal to our work. So as we go through, we're going to focus on student learning and engagement, learning spaces, environment, professional learning. We're going to focus first on how do we improve the work. Then we're going to look at communication, public relations, branding. How do we then share the work? And finally, improve the work, share the work, creates opportunity for your students, for your teachers, for yourselves, for your community. And what you hopefully will see is how digital tools are embedded in every single one of these pillars. So let's dive right in and let's talk about student engagement, learning, outcomes. The one thing that we lacked in my former school, and by the way, everyone, when we went through our transformation process, our school for the first time ever won awards for improving academic achievement. And, from going bring your own device 13 years ago, personalized blended learning 12 years ago, we were doing all the stuff that people are talking about now. My school was doing it before anyone else here in America. But everyone always focused on our technology initiatives. And what I always have to say is the technology is not what helped us improve outcomes. It was having a common vision, common language, common expectations for what we wanted going on in our classrooms every single day. And you're looking at the framework that we used. And we were successful because we kept it simple. We focused on two things. How do we empower our kids to think? That's the vertical axis. And that's not new. And number two, how do we get our kids to apply their thinking in relevant and meaningful ways? And that is the horizontal axis. So this Rigor relevance framework helped us just improve teaching and learning without technology. But when we started to then dive in and I started, saying, hey, we got to use digital tools more, we made a lot of mistakes. And, what we learned was if we just put technology in the hands of our kids, nothing's going to change. So that framework kind of helped us establish that, where we wanted to go, our common look-fors, giving teachers the opportunity to reflect on their practice. But this quote kind of resonated with us. If you don't get instructional design right first, all technology is going to do is speed up the rate of failure. So I showed you that Rigor Relevance framework because it's all about good teaching and learning. The technology should support and enhance teaching and learning. So in my work, I'm very fortunate to be in classrooms during the pandemic, mostly here in America, prior to the pandemic, all over the world. But I wanted to show you some examples of what schools are doing here in America just in the past year. And what you will see is example after example of good teaching where technology is taking it to another level. So in all these images, you see students actively sharing their work. You see a little grade 1 student here on the left creating a diagram using sight words and then voicing over where every kid in the class is able to do it. On the right, that's a closure activity. At the end of the lesson, students go on and they share their inference at the end of that lesson. Here you see more examples on the left. That's a tool called Nearpod, where kids are drawing their response to a question at the end of the lesson. And what you see here is all the drawings look different. And that's the beauty. The technology allows kids to share what they've learned in a way that's comfortable for them. On the right, that's a grade 5 student who's processing a word problem. And then after he processes a word problem, he'll go on to a digital tool with his peers and share his response. Here you see more students actively empowered in the learning process. On the left, that is a grade 7 student who's solving a math problem on the desk. Then after solving that problem, we'll go on and use a digital tool where every kid can respond. On the right, that's a student reading independently. And as she is reading independently, she's annotating. But as you can see on her screen, she's using a digital tool called Padlet, where not only is she adding her annotation, but so are all the other kids in class or the ones that are coming in virtually. This is grade 8 math. These are students working at their own pace, solving high-level math problems. But what the beauty of this is, students are able to work ahead. And the teacher is able to see in real time students that are not getting it. And that's how he uses his time in class to support the kids that need it the most. More examples. This is secondary. This is grade 10 science. The lesson began using a tool called Mentimeter on the left, where all the students looked at graph data and then answered a question related to it. In the same class, they then went on a different tool on the right and were having a vibrant discussion, answering questions in real time with their peers. I quickly showed you really good examples of good teaching, everybody. Good teaching is good teaching, learning is learning, leadership is leadership. Those three things have not changed. The environment has changed. Technology has changed. Research on the brain has changed. As leaders, it's incumbent upon you to create that common vision, common language, common expectations, to use concepts that are not new to your staff. This is why we use the Rigor Relevance framework. And this iteration of it was created by my staff. And as you can see, It's all about taking that critical lens to make sure that the technology is supporting or enhancing learning. You can use the question stems on the vertical axis, but you also want to make sure that kids are, when they're using technology, they're applying their learning in relevant ways. And that's the key, everybody. It's not what the adult does with the technology. It's how are your students using technology to learn in ways they couldn't without it. And on that note, I developed this framework to get you to think about your role in supporting peers, supporting teachers, and change is a process, it's not an event. But going back to what we know about teaching and learning, your role is critical. Obviously you want to provide research and resources to support good pedagogical practice. You want to make the time to provide feedback. I can show you all these images, but every picture you saw was because of the feedback that I provided to the school leader, and then how the school leader used that feedback to move his or her staff. Feedback has to be practical, timely, collaborative. You want to learn with your teachers, with other administrators. You want to collect and analyze evidence. What does effective use of technology look like? And I showed you a few examples. And finally, you want to develop those relationships based on trust and mutual respect through mentoring and modeling. So understand that as we go through in our short time, the most important aspect of the work is to improve teaching and learning. All right, so let's talk about learning environment and spaces. Now, I've been talking for a good amount of time, so I'm going to pause in a minute because I want you to reflect on this question. And I would like you to jot down some notes and think about the good and also where you feel you need to grow. So how has the learning culture changed? If you're a teacher in your classroom, if you're a leader in your school, so how has the learning culture changed to meet the needs of your learners? Think about all the great stuff that you've done. Jot a few things down. Hey, where have we shown progress? Where have we moved the needle? After you think about that, where do you need to go? How should the culture change going forward? So I'm going to give you about a minute or two to kind of jot down some notes. There's your question. And I'm going to have a quick drink of my tea. And then as you reflect, then I'm going to add some more context to this question. So take a minute or two to reflect, jot down some notes. Where are you now? But where do you think your culture needs to go? Written some things down to kind of get you to think about where your school culture is. And, one thing that I see a lot of here in America is all kids doing the same thing at the same time, the same way. Teaching to the middle. What I want you to think about is how have you or will you create a personalized learning experience for your students? Personalization is not about putting every kid on a device and having them use an adaptive learning tool. Personalization is about all kids getting what they need when and where they need it. It's about how we make instruction personal, how the pedagogical techniques we use to empower kids to learn, how we make the curriculum meaningful, relevant, engaging, how you use data to group, regroup, provide targeted instruction to differentiate. And these elements we want to focus on is And I showed you some already. Voice, getting all kids involved in the lesson. Choice, choosing the right tool for the right task. Choosing a set amount of tasks. Following the right path. Working at their own pace. And learning in a place that's most comfortable for them. So what does this look like? You know, when we think about the best way to personalize, there isn't one best way, but one of the most impactful strategies is blended learning. Now, there's a difference between blended learning and blended instruction. Blended instruction is what the teacher does with tech, meaning all kids go on and use the same tool, the same time, the same way. That's an instructional strategy. Blended learning is where students use technology to control some aspect of path, pace, and place. So, what does blended learning look and feel like? Let me show you. This was my grade 5 team in one of my implementations during the pandemic. And this is what all of their classes look like, even still today. So this is the learning management system. This is in Canvas. The kids go on here on their devices. And at the top, you see stations. When kids clicked on that, they started on an activity on a digital tool, Padlet, and then the teacher used data to group these students into different stations, and they rotated through 4 different activities. So they're not doing the same thing at the same time. So they rotated through, and at the end, they would do an exit ticket activity. This is one model to blend called station rotation. And this is what station rotation looks like at the secondary level. This is grade 11 math, where the teacher still teaches, but after teaching for about 10, 15 minutes, the students then rotate through 4 different activities. So station rotation is one way to blend. There's also choice. So this was a choice board for some of our youngest learners. And what they would do is they would pick one activity from each color. They're not doing them all. And that's the point of choice. But after they chose an activity, they would complete it and they would upload their evidence to a digital tool called Seesaw. So again, they're not doing the same thing at the same time, the same way. They have more autonomy over their learning. Here's a grade 4 choice activity modeled after Tic-Tac-Toe. The fires are more difficult. They pick 3 tasks to do Tic-Tac-Toe. There's a timer so the kids can work at their own pace. And behind all these examples, the teacher is pulling students for one-on-one intensive support. And the fires are more difficult tasks. Oh, almost forgot. I want to show you what it actually looks and feels like. So this is a video from a grade 6 class. So you'll see the choice board, you'll see learning targets, but I want you to just watch the kids. And this will give you a sense of what I see when I go into classrooms. So let me show you this quick. And there you finally see the teacher. And guess why the teacher's at that table? If you look closely at the top of the computers, you will either see red clothespins or green clothespins. Through my work with this school, the teacher constructed her own knowledge, came up with this idea for kids to say, hey, if I need help, let me put that pin on my computer. This school was not doing any of this prior to the work that I began with them. But you can see how kids are getting what they need, when and where they need it. Here is secondary science. This is what it looks like to be in biology class in 10th grade. You can see the digital classroom. You can see all the materials there, but this is what it looks like from the learner's point of view, everybody. All the blue are hyperlinks. Kids can get their videos, their worksheets. There's instructional videos from the teacher. Everything is accessible. And this is what it looks like right now. And as you go through, one of the activities involved choice. So as you look at where your school is, where your classroom is, you got to be honest. You got to ask the right questions. On the left-hand side of this image, blue, that's the way we've always done it. You got to look at that balance. Is it just a lot of teaching? Is it mostly the adult? Or are you seeing kids actively learning like that video or those examples that I showed you? Now, blue isn't bad, everybody, but the key is we don't want to reside in blue. So in your role as a leader, looking at these high agency approaches in red, think about where's there opportunity to grow? Where's there opportunity to move the needle? What do you need to be successful? Because learning is what the kids do. Instruction is what the teacher does. And there has to be a good balance of that. So when you go back and reflect, start to generate your goals, desired outcomes, but also a plan of action. All right, everybody. We are throttling down because our time is limited. Another aspect to look at in terms of digital leadership is how do you support your staff, but how do you grow as well? And the research is pretty clear. Professional learning that gets results is job embedded and ongoing. Every image or video I've shown you, I've been with those schools, some for over 3 years. The key is if you want results, one and done drive-by is not going to get it. You got to create the conditions where there's ongoing feedback, there's accountability, aligned to research, there's evidence to show growth over time. Now, I'm willing to wager many of you are not a fan of American football, and that's okay. This guy is Nick Saban. He's one of the best American college coaches here in America. But the quote is what I really love. I didn't invent any of this stuff. I learned it from somebody. So I'm always looking for the next person I'm going to learn something from. Who is your person, everybody? When you are done your conference, who will you learn from? How will you have your thinking pushed? And my point with all this is you want to find people to learn and grow with. I started my presentation with the Twitter bird. When I got on social media, it changed my whole trajectory. That's how I find my people to learn and grow. So you want to set up job-embedded ongoing professional learning that focuses on the purposeful use of technology. You also want to find people that are going to support your growth as leaders, but you also want to ask the right questions. Questions are more important than answers. And what I've done here is I've provided you questions to think about, not now, but as you go on with your work. How has teaching, learning, and leadership changed at scale in relation to the current environment? What evidence do you have to demonstrate the impact of technology and innovation on school culture? How are you making learning relevant for your students? How do you implement, support rigorous and relevant learning tasks that help kids become future ready right now? How are you using data to close achievement gaps, make informed decisions, and personalize learning? What observable evidence can be used to determine the effectiveness of digital tools? How can targeted feedback be provided to teachers, students, and other school leaders to ensure longitudinal improvement? And what support do you and your colleagues need so you can succeed now and in the future? As I mentioned before, change is a process. And when you think about professional learning, there's so many options that you have. I mean, look at this right now. I'm coming to you from the other side of the world, but there's so many options. And I'm going to give you some things at the end that are free to think about where you are, but to chart your course for where you want to go. Other aspects of digital leadership. We want to improve the work, but how do you get people on board? How do you get people excited? How do you help them see the why, the how, and the what? And it really is about how you effectively communicate. Communication is about building relationships, showing value, engaging your stakeholders, your families, your communities, showcasing success, and building loyalty. So as you think about the power of communication, leadership should change with technology, especially the way we communicate. We've moved from localized to mass broadcast to mass dialogue, thinking about how everyone is on social media, Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, Twitter, LinkedIn. How has your communication changed? How are you meeting your stakeholders where they are? Are you using the tools that your communities are using to get them the right information at the right time through the right medium? Are you meeting your stakeholders where they are? And I get it. Well, Eric, I don't know if I want to use social media. I don't see the value in it. That was me. I was against it. But when I got on it, it just opened up a world of opportunity. Why? You will not find an effective leader who's not an effective communicator, everybody. And in this digital age, communication is, as you see it on this image, people are on devices for better, for worse, but we can leverage that. You can take advantage of that. Another aspect is you work hard. You know great things are happening in your schools, but sometimes parents and families aren't on board with their students using technology, or they're not on board with innovative practices like many of which I showed you. So we want to take control of our public relations. Consistently sharing all the great stuff drowns out any mention of the bad. We want you to control the message, to build morale, to showcase all the great things that are happening in your schools. But public relations and communication rely on changing practice first. Some of the best ways to take control of your public relations in the digital space is to use the tools that you have available. You could send out hyperlinks to newsletters, to articles, but you can use pictures and video. I already showed you public relations from my lens, where I showed you a picture. I actually showed you many pictures of actual classrooms. I showed you a video from an actual classroom, and I'll show you another video in a minute. But images are probably one of the most easiest ways to control your messaging. The brain processes images faster than text, 60,000 times faster than text. So we could write our emails, do our memos, but it's not going to have the same impact as an image. Yesterday, I took tons of pictures of amazing practice that I'm going to put into my presentation. And when we look at images, it resonates differently. What you're looking at now are images of some of the awards that we won for improving achievement. And what you will see on the left is our school became one of America's best high schools for achievement. We also became one of the best in our respective state. And that image just gets people fired up. They can process it differently than that text. There's also video, everybody. Do you know a 1-minute video is equal to 1.8 million written words? Crazy. A 1-minute video. So I want to show you another video from a secondary school. And it's just amazing. But let me show you another example of good practice in the digital age. Here we go.
Okay, so one of my kids in class, we did a choice board, and these are different types of equations. So you have combustion, synthesis, double displacement, single displacement, decomposition. So we learned about them, and then we did a choice board. And what Will did is he made a game on Scratch, and you click right here. So the equation pops up down here, and this is me. You can see me, and you can move me up and down. And so if it's a single displacement, so for instance, if that was single displacement, I would try to find a blue ball, and I would go down here and I would shoot the blue ball. Okay, the only problem is if you run into one of these, kind of like Galaga, if you run into one of those, say you lose lives. So you have to not only stay there, but you have to figure out the equations and shoot the equations while doing this.
Amazing stuff, everybody. When we communicate, when we take control of our public relations, it creates a brand presence. You know, as you think about a brand, some iconic brands, Apple, you know, when we think about your smartphone, McDonald's, you know, why do you buy certain things? What has that connection to you? You know, a brand is meant to sell. In education, it's not about selling, it's about telling our story and building those relationships with our families. What you saw here today was I worked my way through just good teaching. We focused on teaching and learning, professional learning to, again, build that foundation. And the whole idea is when we think about sharing goals, mission, vision, results, digital tools allow you to amplify the message and create that brand that people see value in. And when you improve the work, share the work, celebrate the work, it creates opportunity. And as you think about opportunity, here's the thing, everybody. All these elements are interconnected, all these pillars. Nothing happens in isolation. But you saw many examples of schools who improved learning in the classroom, improved the learning environment and the space, grew professionally, then they communicated it, turned it into stories, built that brand presence. And what that opportunity was better learning for their students. So as promised, there is my contact information. If you're interested in the book, you could scan that code, but my email is there. And we do have 3 minutes if there are any questions. And what I will be doing is I'll be putting a link into the chat box momentarily. Hopefully you'll all be able to see it. If not, I'm sure it'll get emailed to you. But are there any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Scheninger, for this very informative presentation, and it is really encouraged us to reflect our own school practice throughout the whole presentation. So in the chat box, there is very positive feedback and the realizations that we really need to change, but no questions. So
you all
far.
are easy.
Yeah, I think you probably too much thinking on that. Yeah. So, but I think this motto that you mentioned in the beginning, work smarter, not harder, I guess I will adopt it for myself. Okay. So with this, thank you. Yes, sorry.
Oh no, it just, everyone is, as you really work to change, understand this.
Mm-hmm.
There's power in saying, I don't know, and I need help. The hardest part is being honest about where we are. There's my timer. Where we are in terms of our practice. And there's no shame in saying, hey, you know what? We're not doing this well. We got to get better. Ask more questions, and you have all the tools and the means to get answers to your questions. And even though you all are halfway across the world, there's nothing stopping you from reaching out to people like me or anyone in other corners of the world. Focus on the people that are already doing it and leverage their expertise.
It's actually the question that I would like to ask is about how did you motivate your teachers to start this work that massively and that actively? Because you can understand me, like every innovation struggles with this resistance to be adopted.
Interesting, because I deal with resistance all the time. You get what you model. So don't ask others to do what you're not willing to do or have not done yourself. Model, learn shoulder to shoulder with your teachers. Show them that you are willing to take risks, that you're going to be vulnerable, that you don't have all the answers. And then as you model, provide support, whether it's the digital tools, professional learning, visiting other classrooms, and then give them feedback and then sit back and bask in their success.
Thank you, Mr. Schenger. Thank you for inspiration. So thank you all. I would like to thank all our participants here who took part in this session. So please make sure to join our further plenary session to sum up the results of the first day of the conference. Thank you all. Goodbye.